Welcome to Uncopyable Women in Sales. If you're looking for actionable insights and real-world tools to turbocharge your sales starting tomorrow, well, you're in the right place. Your host, Kay Miller, earned the affectionate nickname Muffler Mama when she sold more automotive mufflers than anyone else in the world. In this podcast, Kay will talk to another superstar woman in sales as they reveal uncopyable strategies you can use to rack up more leads, snag dream clients, and take your sales numbers through the roof. Stay tuned and get ready to make more sales and how about this? More money.
Today, I am delighted to be talking with Luann Horobin. Luann is an executive and leadership coach. She specializes in career acceleration and transformational mindset. Through her website, masteringyoursavvy.com, she offers coaching and consulting, and she also works with individuals and groups. Luann, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Kay. I'm really happy to be here. It's just a pleasure and an honor. What your topic is one of my favorite topics to work with and also to talk about. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fun. I mentioned I just listened to a podcast that you were on, and it was fascinating. And by the way, I should say, you are from Canada, and we are recording this on July 4th, which is Independence Day here in the U.S., but it's only 11, so I have plenty of time to party afterwards. And you just had Canada Day on the 1st, right?
I know, we did. Yes. I think it's fabulous that we're neighbors and we celebrate a similar day within the same week.
I do too. I think that's great. And you, by the way, had a fascinating LinkedIn post, if anybody wants to find that. Lots of fun facts about Canada, some that I knew and some that I didn't, eh?
Yes, I know. People always say you have that Canadian accent, and I'm thinking, I have an accent?
Yeah, really? You have an accent,
Thanks.
right? So right before we started, we talked about something that you said, which is sales is such a fundamental piece of business and pretty much everything we do in life. So tell me a little more about why you feel that way.
So why I feel that way is probably more of a learned perspective, because it's certainly not what I started thinking earlier in my life, for sure. But I think what I've learned is, from an earlier perspective, I thought sales was this thing, probably from an earlier experience of having someone try to be sort of salesy with me and me not really appreciating it. So I kind of had that opinion of sales. And then as I worked through the various transitions that I did in life, I recognized, sales is really it's just simply connecting and serving, and which really we do in all parts of our life. Because when we think about it in our relationships, especially in all aspects of our business, we're simply connecting and we're simply serving. And without both of those, it requires both. We can't miss one or the other. Without those, we're not likely to really have things work very well.
Right.
So I see it, as a fundamental skill in all parts of our life. Sorry.
Yes. Sorry, I'm interrupting. I like the fact that you say, you know what it's like to be on the other end of someone who's trying to close you or be pushy. I talk a lot about that in the book. Of course, I have some examples. And that's kind of seems like common sense, but I think we get in our sales mode and we kind of forget even those basics. So what a great reminder that sales is a fundamental part of success in so many arenas. So you talked in this other podcast I listened to about growing up on a farm and learning some valuable lessons. And then as an adult, you were in the healthcare field, but suddenly had a career change, right? And you said that some of these mindset things that you talk about now and you teach were really, super helpful, important in making a successful change. So tell us about that.
Sure. Yes. Well, thank you. Thank you. It was a significant path of learning. And I must say one that I did quite naively, because as I mentioned, I was raised on the farm and we were very, I would say, achievement and productive oriented. So before I even went to school, I could actually stand on a stool and I could make lunch for like the hired family and the hired family and the hired men, which was about 10 people. And I could drive, I could do all these things, which I know.
How old were you when you drove the first time? I hate to say, I know it wouldn't be.
Well, it was before I went to school. I was probably around 5 or so.
Wow.
But it was restricted driving. I mean, I didn't have full free range. It was just in the yard because we had a huge farmyard and I could take the truck, but I knew how to take the truck and I knew how to I had to put both feet. Sorry, this is a bit of a sidebar, but I had to put both feet on the clutch and stand up and pull on the gear shift. But then I was tall enough to see and I was only allowed to go up to the 10. And so I knew how to do that. And then I knew how to stop it. And of course, when my dad was teaching me, I was very supervised. So I didn't feel at risk at all. And I knew that I could stop instantly and how to shut it off. So I could do all this before I went to school, which is what I was saying. And so I always was accustomed to having a really high level of energy and doing a lot. And so when I went to school and it just seemed like it just felt like it was kind of a little bit slow. Like, we had recess, we had lunch, and then we had gym. And then I was thinking oh, what are we going to be doing today?
You were that kid, I see.
I probably was. So I don't think I was really very relatable at that age. But then I also really had a desire for healthcare. So when I went into healthcare, I was in middle management. And I loved my job. I had organizational development and people development, but there was a massive restructure and I very unexpectedly received a package, which I just completely was unprepared for. I just didn't even have that in my mind, which afterwards I thought was also a little bit naive. But I guess what I'm saying is these lessons kind of taught me that call it human design. I had a function of energy and design that worked well for me. And it was really hard to fit into certain settings. And I kind of grew out of them. So when I got let go, I was also a single mom. And I just really had to decide quickly. I really had to just push myself. And so I did the very best that I could. But it honestly, I took programs, I read books. I was in high gear because it was a pretty stressful time. But it wasn't until I really started thinking, I think I'm doing something wrong. I think I'm not thinking about things very well because this is really hard. And it should be achievable, but I feel like I'm plodding through it. And I started looking into learning about mindset. And it was like the light bulb started going off and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, yes, I'm trying to make a big change from a tunnel vision. And that's probably not going to be easy.
You took a really deep dive into learning about this and became a certified coach and now you help people. And I'm so fascinated, as I said, about NLP, which is Neuro-Linguistic Programming. Kind of a big word there, phrase, but let's talk about some of the tools that you discovered that helped you and can help our listeners who are either in sales or they're business owners, entrepreneurs, or as you said, anything else. They're trying to convince their spouse where they should go to dinner.
Well, so that's so true because typically when we're in a place where we want something that is going to be changing, we look outside, like we think of a book or should I talk to somebody? And those are very good resources, but we're still learning it from our own perspective. So we can only learn from our own perspective, which is why it takes an outside perspective to show us something that is so familiar, we're not likely to see it. And that's definitely how the subconscious mind works. So to answer your question, yes, Neuro-Linguistic Programming is kind of a mouthful. Mm-hmm. So I call it NLP because I'm much more likely to say that a lot smoother.
Yes, and explain what that is.
Yes.
I don't quite understand it. So
okay, so Neuro-Linguistic Programming comes from the neuro. The neuro part is it's like visual, auditory, kinesthetic. And so we're working with this subconscious mind, like this. So I need to go back a step just so we understand the importance of this. The subconscious mind is actually 90% of our mind. So it works at 2 billion bits of information a second.
Wow.
Versus the conscious mind, which is 10%, is like about 2,000. And so there's varying statistics on that, so you can probably hear something different. But the bottom line is the subconscious is 90%, the conscious is 10%, which means we make decisions from the conscious mind, but they're actually run by our beliefs. So when we're trying to do something with the conscious mind, it's almost kind of like the Flintstones wheel running along, the Flintstones car, kind of like running along beside a train. It's probably not going to catch up. It takes a little bit. We have to change something for the two to be able to be complementary. And so to come back to NLP, the subconscious mind picks up messages, like the neuro part is the visual, auditory, kinesthetic. But then there's the linguistic part. And the linguistic part is like the pictures, the sounds, the feelings, the tastes. So these are all triggers. They're kind of like, if you can imagine, the subconscious mind is a river, and the visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and the pictures, sounds, and the feelings are all streams that feed the river.
Interesting. That's a great analogy. I've heard like the iceberg analogy, the 10%, maybe the 90%,
Yes.
but I haven't heard about the river. I like that. And the tributaries. How's that for a big word?
Yes,
The tributaries are, coming in and forming that. So
yes, the tributaries are all the things that we see. So we'll see something and it triggers an earlier event memory, but it's so fast. It's not like we think, oh, I remember when I was in grade 5 and did this. Like, it doesn't happen like that. It triggers that feeling of when we were in grade 5 and that thing happened without us identifying really what it is. So we have these triggers, which are the streams that feed these beliefs. And ultimately, that's how we see the world. The programming is simply it's like the neural pathways. So we have the triggers that send the neural pathways into the message. So then we ultimately have this river. And that's how we run. That's how we're operated. But it's actually running us.
right. So we want to change that. So how do we get to those tributaries?
So there are many ways of becoming aware of what those tributaries are. That's actually the biggest thing. And we become aware of what the tributaries are, first of all, by noticing what's in our outside world, because our outside world is an exact mirror of what we've been thinking and how we've been carrying that out. So if there's something that's not going so great in our outside world and telling us,
A clue, right?
here's a place where I could look, and I could look at how I'm thinking about it. The other thing is that these triggers are so fast and so quick that we're not going to consciously recognize them all the time. But what we might recognize instead is something like a state. Like, we might recognize, I've been feeling a lot of tension. And part of this is because when they trigger a belief, so I hope this isn't too much science, but
We'll get through it, and then we'll get to the part that you can dumb it down for people like me.
okay, so when something triggers something, like let's say when a trigger comes along and it's a stress, it literally triggers cortisol, which literally shuts down our veins. It's like it puts the brakes on in our body. This is why people get tension in their shoulders, or they get headaches, or other physical symptoms, because that's what stress does. So if we're having those things, this is what I was referring to in state, that means we have a stress going on that we might not really be aware of. And this is where it's helpful to help. It's really helpful to always to work with somebody that is familiar with picking up those signals more than we are ourselves.
So how do we, it's interesting. My husband, by the way, on May 31st, so a little over a month ago, had a stroke, and it was a minor stroke, and he's okay. And so last week's episode, I talk about how that all unfolded. And I did mention the fact that I have heard that when your brain is flooded with cortisol like this, you cannot think straight. So I talked a little bit about how I would prepare for this happening again. So going through the scenario in my mind. So I assume that's one of the tools that you use. So how else do you get yourself prepared for these triggers that you don't even know are there?
Oh, well, when we notice that our state, there are some tools that are actually they're actually quite quick, and they're very easy for us to use as individuals. So we don't always have to know exactly what the belief is. It's more helpful if we can get to the root of the belief, because if we get to the root of the belief, we shut off. What NLP does is, when I work with people, is I shut off the triggers that are in all those little streams. So the river will actually change. There will not be that river. You'll actually reroute to a new river. That's what NLP does by working with those stimulus. But what we can do for ourselves is there's a few things. One of them is to ask questions, because you mentioned cortisol does shut down the part of your brain that creates those good feelings. It's the part of the brain that has solutions. So it's kind of like a double whammy. If we're stressed and we're focused on problems, we can't solve it, because the part of the brain that would solve it is shut down. So the first thing is to just say, is to ask a question, because the subconscious mind has to answer a question. So a question that we can ask is, how can this get better? The subconscious mind will automatically do that, will automatically go to answer this. How can this get better? The word better triggers the other part, the endorphins. So how can
we all know about endorphins, right? Yeah.
Yes, we all know
you
about
can get from good fatty food or taking a run, depending on your preference. But yes, okay. So it's interesting. So just thinking instead of reacting, asking yourself, pausing and saying, how can this get better, is really powerful.
Today's podcast is sponsored by the acclaimed book, Uncopyable Sales Secrets, How to Create an Unfair Advantage and Outsell Your Competition, by Kay Miller. If you want to make more sales, you need to read this book. We'll even get you started with a free download of the first 2 chapters. Go to uncopyablesales.com/chapters to grab this offer right now.
Yes, it's very powerful because it's a solution-oriented question. Another question that is very powerful is, how is this exactly perfect? And the reason that that's very powerful is that it helps people see the bigger scope, rather than when it's stressful, we tend to spiral down onto a smaller focus of this particular incident. But when we look at a bigger picture, we can see this is a small part of a big picture.
Right. And that reminds me of your career change, because that was not intentional, and you saw it, I'm sure, as a disaster at the time, but you ended bigger than you were dressed to the max, but it led you to something that you're really passionate about. So that's a great simple example of something that really is a cornerstone to what happens in the future.
Yes, that's true. So in that period of time, they always say that necessity is a definite
mother of invention, right?
Mother of invention, right. Yes. So I really needed to be to be on top of my game, because I needed to figure out what was the next path pretty quickly. And so I asked myself that question. How is this actually leading me to something better? Like, what is it that I need to see? What do I need to be open to? And how can I find this? And I asked myself those questions. How is this exactly perfect? How will this work out exactly perfectly? And as I did that, I found myself I find that whenever I ask these questions, answers will pop into my head. I will get ideas. And what came to me then, because I was in healthcare, what came to me was, well, Luann, really, you'd like to work in more industries than healthcare. So this is your chance to go and do that. And so it became an opportunity instead of, an impact.
Yes, or a failure. We of course hear that failure way to success and different ways of looking at this. But I think a lot of these things are broad concepts that I love the fact that you're giving specific questions you can ask, because I fight a lot with negative feelings, negative thoughts. And, it's a lot of work to keep just paying, oh, I'm thinking that negative thought. I need to flip it to the positive. So what you're talking about goes deeper, and it sounds like sets you up for different kind of thinking.
Yes. Well, first of all, it changes our energy. So because it's really hard for us to function when even our blood cells are all restricted. Like, it's just difficult. The other thing that you mentioned was failure, and it helped me recognize that. And I know this can sound a little bit corny, so pardon the corniness part, but this is actually what I truly have found has worked, is that there actually really isn't failure. Failure was a way of getting somewhere. And because it didn't work, it actually showed me. It's kind of like a detour road sign. It says, go this way. Or maybe it's kind of like if you make a recipe and you miss an ingredient. Next time, add the other ingredient, right? It's really a road sign that says, this is the way. You're actually closer than you were before, which is true. You are closer than you were before. It's just, can you see that? It's showing you the bridge. It's really a bridge. And once I recognize, you know what, this is really a bridge for me. And I started seeing the potential and opportunity. I thought, oh yeah, this is really a bridge. And that's what, when we run into obstacles, and if it's a bridge, it's less likely to hold us back. It's less likely to be that restricting energy. So it becomes more empowering energy.
Yeah, I like that. And so you've talked about just some simple phrases we can ask ourselves. I know before we started recording, you said you had a simple posture change that could help people, I don't know, be better, help their mindset be more positive. So let's talk about what that would be.
Okay, well, so the simple posture that people often do when they're looking for a change in something, it's just really quite easy to do. And it's, but I want to have a brain moment of conversation.
Okay.
Because what it's doing is, when we're upset or tense, there's like a tunnel between the left and right brain that is disconnected. That's why we feel tension. And that's why everything goes stiff. And that's when cortisol comes up. So we want to open the bridge between the left and right brain. And the way we do that is simply by, if a person was to cross over their arms and clasp their hands, their palms together, and also cross over your feet. Like, just cross your feet over.
Okay, I've got that going, and I'm all crunched in on myself. Is that right? Am I doing it right?
Yes, it is a little bit crunchy. It's kind of like a pretzel. And when you do that, picture what it is that you want. Or you might also think of, if there's a belief statement that you want, like, it's easy for me to connect and serve. It's easy for me to do that. And you'll notice that as you do that, that automatically connects and opens up that tunnel between the two. You just sit there and you'll actually feel a shift. You'll feel something kind of click. It's just a little more challenging. But the thing about that posture of crossing your hands under, you can do it really discreetly. Like, if you're in a stressful situation, like sometimes if people are in family conversations, you can cross your hands and your feet under the table, and you can stay. When you can stay in that state of the endorphins versus the cortisol, you will see you'll experience that situation differently. Because
let me get this. So you're saying you do kind of go into that folded up pose, and then as you're coming out of it, is that what's reinforcing that?
While you're in the pose, the corpus callosum will connect. Okay. And you'll just feel the shift.
Oh, I was mixed up then. I thought that was a bad thing, but you're saying
it's okay. You just stay there until you feel that shift. You can stay there for, like, if you're in a difficult situation, if a person's in a difficult situation, they can sit there with their hands crossed or their ankles crossed. It will cross over that, and it will keep them in an open-minded state, and it will keep the endorphins, access to the endorphins, and it will not fire the cortisol.
Interesting.
This
Yeah,
is
like you said, I had it mixed up, and we were talking about Amy Cuddy and the power pose and taking up more space when you're presenting, and that can impact the brain. So I was kind of thinking along that line. But you're saying there's this other way to look at that, or use your body.
Yes, when you cross this over, it will actually connect the left and right brain. So please know that for people who are really science oriented, this is a layman's terms. This is a layman's simplified discussions. We're not getting into
right. And of course, Luann, not only does she have courses on her website, which is masteringyoursavvy.com, she does work with individuals and groups. So yeah, any of this you want to really dive into and get Luann's help, I'll have the contact information in the show notes.
Yes, thank you. And I noticed when I was reading your book, I noticed that you actually had several aspects of this, like the visualizing. And so we just go into a little bit more detail of how in visualizing, how you're actually speaking to those streams that I was talking about to create new neural pathways. So you're actually creating a new state. And it's very possible. I mean, I watch people do it all the time.
Fascinating. Well, as we're talking, I'm thinking about something that I have learned recently, and it's just been such a great demonstration of your subconscious and the neural pathways. And that is that I have started playing the piano.
Oh, fantastic.
It's so fun. When my daughter, who's now 31, our daughter, sorry, Steve, was 5, she started taking piano lessons because we, of course, had her do, everything from violin and karate, whatever. We were those parents, right? So
yes,
we'll take that on. But now that I've gone back to it in the last 6 months or so, and I'm really dedicated, it's amazing. I'll get through this quickly, but how you learn a piece of music and you're thinking through it, and then you get to playing it at a speed that there's no way you can think through the notes. It's just happening.
Exactly. Yes, that's exactly correct. And I think when you're I want to, can I relate this back to sales?
Sure. Yeah. We only have a few minutes, but I would love to relate it back to sales.
So what I'm hearing you say, and this is a huge part of mindset. So when we remove triggers, like we change all those streams, what I hear you saying is that you're really loving something.
Oh, for sure. I had no idea. I love it.
Yes. And so what people say when we love something, so we think of how you love it. So one of the things that made the biggest difference for sales for me was I thought, I don't believe in sales as I earlier experienced it. I believe that it's possible to have fun with it. It's possible to make it so that I like it. And our whole energy changes when we're doing something that we really like. So I'm sure so what I help people do actually is find a way to do it that they like it, that they can enjoy it. And their energy is different. All of our energy is different, right?
Yes. And people can pick up on that for sure. And yeah, sometimes I think sales has such a negative connotation that if we say, you know what, I'm in the business of helping people, and talk about that that sounds corny, but really if you think of sales as finding people with a problem or a challenge or an aspiration, and you can provide the solution, you can help them move toward what they want. What's wrong with that? I mean, it's great. It's great for you and it's great for the customer. I mean, we all want to make the world a better place. So you're doing that one person at a time.
Yes. And it's fabulous. So I think that's ultimately how mindset made such a difference, is made me really realize. And that's what I like to help people do, is change the way we look at it, change the way we approach it, but also give us some help by changing some of those triggers as well.
Right. Well, that's really powerful, because I think so many of us, including me, maybe not you, but you probably have to get yourself on track. We go through life and work just kind of on autopilot. So paying attention to these things is really, they're game changers. So again, Luann, I've been fascinated by our conversation. I love the fact that you were driving when you were a little kid, and I've heard those stories from people on a farm. It's different there, so don't worry. We're not going to send the police after you. That was a few years ago. Anyway, so Luann Her website is masteringyoursavvy.com. I will put your contact information in the show notes. And again, Luann works with people individually and in groups. Is there any closing thought that you'd like to offer our listeners who want to be better at connecting and selling and, having a positive mindset?
I think that just observing, being present in the moment allows you to get out of that autopilot, like you mentioned, and connect with something that you really like. Because in each moment, you can connect with something you really like, and the person that you're with will pick up on your energy, and you'll enjoy it more.
Exactly.
So one moment at a time.
I love that. One moment at a time. You'll enjoy it more. They will enjoy it more. And I believe, I'm sure you do too. You'll make more sales. You'll be more successful. You'll grow your business. So Luann, thank you for the wealth of information. Thank you for talking to me on Independence Day in America. So we want to be independent in our thoughts and not be controlled by them. So thank you so much for your time and for being on the podcast.
It truly was my pleasure. It was my honor. And I thank you so much for having me as your guest. I greatly appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Uncopyable Women in Sales, your source for secrets you can use to make more sales. Check the show notes for links and contact information. And if you enjoyed the podcast, please spread the word by subscribing, sharing, and leaving a 5-star review. You can always learn more by going to uncopyablesales.com/podcast. Until next time, go out and supercharge your sales like a true uncopyable rock star.